Stop getting rejected by banks when opening an account for your Wyoming LLC. Today, I'm sharing the exact process that's worked for thousands of our clients. You'll learn which banks to avoid, what documents you actually need, and how to get approved on your first try.
It can be a challenge to open up a bank account for an LLC that you form out of state. It's important to have the right banking partner, and here's how to do it right. You want to make sure you've got all your ducks in a row. When I'm talking about ducks, I'm actually talking about documents. Making sure you've got your articles of organization, making sure you've got your operating agreement, make sure you've got your EIN number and other documents such as authorizations that the bank may require. Every bank is different. They make up their own rules when it comes to this, and some are more challenging to work with than others. The good news is you don't need to have a bank account in Wyoming. It's not going to undermine your protection by having a bank account in another state. I don't recommend having a bank account with one of the national banks. The national banks say things like, you're in Florida, why do you have a Wyoming LLC? They don't understand why you would want that. They want to make it easy for themselves, not easy for you. So having the right bank partner is very important for you. Another thing is going to be your common application issues that you may have. You got to think of the application as involving two parts. One is information about the company. The company information is different than your information. The banks want to make sure that the company is validly existing, that it sort of ticks all the boxes, but then they need to make sure you are not involved in anything that's not permitted, not in money laundering. They got to run something called an AML test on you to make sure you're not involved in AML in money laundering. There's something called an OFAC test. Make sure you're not on a list of some sort that's published by the Department of Treasury. They want to make sure that they know who you are, what this business is about. So they're going to be asking questions for you to answer about you. And I see a common mistake is that people will put down, what's your home address? And they'll put down the business address in Wyoming. They're like, no, that's not right, rejected, right? So you're going to tell them everything about you and be honest about that, and then everything about your company. So those are things to keep in mind when you are applying for the bank accounts. And if you can streamline that process in some way, I highly recommend you do it. You are ready to go. You want to form your Wyoming LLC. It's a good fit for you. You're not doing business in some other state. You've got an idea of how you want to proceed. So what do you need to do? Well, you need to file articles of organization with the Secretary of State. The articles of organization, sometimes they're available as an online version. Luckily, Wyoming has online filing, but you need to know what information to put in those articles of organization. They're going to ask questions about who's your registered agent, what is the business address, what's the mailing address, who is going to be the organizer of the company. So you need that information. I don't think it's a do-it-yourself job in most cases. If you value privacy, if you're working in another state like in Wyoming and you don't live there, if you don't want your name listed on that Secretary of State records, then you should hire a professional to do it. But that's the first step, to get those articles of organization filed with the state. The next thing is to get an EIN. The EIN is an employer identification number. You obtain it from the Internal Revenue Service, from the feds, not from the state. That EIN number you can apply for at the IRS website. They're going to ask for information about you and information about your company, and it can be confusing. There's a lot of choices you need to make there about the type of structure of the company, address information, and so on and so forth. Again, you can do it yourself, but I highly recommend you get professional help related to that. When it comes to other documents you may need, you are going to need an operating agreement. You don't need it under Wyoming law, but I highly recommend you have one, even if you're the only person involved in the business. And the reason is it's going to make it easier to open that bank account, and it also provides an additional layer of protection for your company. So those are the basic things you're going to need to do to get your LLC up and running. The next thing to talk about and consider is the costs. So cost at the state level Wyoming, you can form an LLC for $100. You can form it online with a credit card at slightly more. You're going to need to hire a registered agent. Registered agent costs vary, but you can figure about $100 for a registered agent cost. You're going to have to get an EIN number. You can do it yourself, which would be free, or you could hire your accountant to do it, which could be a couple of $100, or you could ask your registered agent. Many of them, like LLC attorney, provide the service and will help you get the EIN, get it right quickly the first time. So you're looking at about $300 to get your company set up and ready to start doing business. So let's talk about some common mistakes that I see when people are filing and forming their company with the Secretary of State. Number one, they put their own information in the Secretary of State website. Wyoming provides privacy. They don't require you to put that information there, but it must be maintained by your registered agent. So you need to give that private information to your registered agent so that they know who is associated with this company. I see people don't get authorization to use the registered agent's address. They think it's a free-for-all. That's theft. That's theft of services. And so if you're using a registered agent, you want to make sure you pay them, that you have an agreement with them, and that if service of process shows up, they are going to know what to do with it and who to send it to. A final mistake that I see many make is that they just make errors. They choose the wrong type of tax status for the company or classification for the company. They choose the wrong type of business entity. They may make decisions about what's in their operating agreement that are wrong. And these things are, for me, not very complicated, and providers who do this as a profession, not complicated. But for most people, I highly recommend that you get some professional help. So don't fall victim to making errors in things you think are easy, but really there is some complexity and nuance to them. Now that you know how to form a Wyoming LLC as a person who doesn't live in Wyoming, you might be wondering exactly what information stays private. And this is especially important for out-of-state owners who want to understand exactly how their information is going to be used. The key things to think about is what information is going to show up in public records, who needs to know your information, and how state privacy considerations should be factored into where you form your company. So click on the video on the screen to learn about business privacy.